gosh, I'm always so afraid when I go to the breakfast that Ken's going to.
And you never know.
I know, and I'm going,
Yeah.
oh, thank goodness it was pick on Kit here.
Well, thank you guys for coming in the last day of school to see my presentation. And I think since you work here, you know most of this stuff, but maybe you might catch something interesting or helpful for next year. This year I was doing my master's through Concordia University, and I decided I could do it in 1 year. It has been rough, but with lots of support from my department and friends, I managed to get through it. And I learned a lot, and the project was intensive and really interesting. So I had titled it at the beginning, Co-Teaching, you know, a great intervention or waste of money. And then I was like, and after I finished it, I looked at it and I went, no. So it is co-teaching, an examination of the comparative benefits of station teaching versus alternative teaching, because those are the two that I looked at. So,
Now, are you all done?
on the 27th.
Okay.
So we started with a problem that we wanted to research and solve. And the problem was, of course, our students come to us with so many needs, and we can't possibly serve all of them by ourselves. And so we had, of course, large classes. I don't know what your class sizes were this year. They weren't as bad as they've been in the past. In the past, I've had classes up to, 42 in an English class before. And this year, it was like 35, 36. It was more doable. But in those large classes, we also have a high number of English language learners. We have, thank you, emotional and behavioral disorder students. And we have a really high group of students coming from homes of poverty, which I have learned has a host of problems that comes with that we need to address. And then, of course, we have our students with special educational needs. So all of these students are in all of our classes, and they bring all of their needs to us, and we have to find some way to address as many of them as possible. And it's really slow. So I put together a little demographic, which honestly made me laugh when I saw it. I put the data together from the census and from housing data around our area. And then I put it in the graphs, and I looked from state to district to Brookhurst. So if you're in the state, this is our demographics. We have almost equal numbers of Hispanic and Latino and white only. We have small amounts of African Americans, probably a 20% of Asians, and that's statewide. And I was like, really? Because I live in this state, and that's not what I see. And then I got the data from our city, and I went, yeah, that's a little bit more what I see. A larger percentage of Hispanic and Latino, smaller percentage of whites, and a little bit larger percentage of Asian. I think they're at Oxford. And then we got to our school campus, and this is what.
I love the dramatic pause between.
I know, I'm sorry about the slide. Wait time. There it is.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. This has changed over the last 14 years. Last summer, I did a graph like this for my UCI writing project, and it showed the trend of demographics over the 14 years I've been here. And this has really changed over the 14 years that I've been here. But this is what we see in our classrooms right now. Does that look about pretty familiar to what you see? And so what we have are a lot of students with language needs that come to us. And on top of the emotional behavioral needs, on top of the special education needs, we also have our subgroups, which, and this will look very familiar to you too. So the top one is our students with disabilities. We know we're about 10%, and that's about normal. Our ELs are almost half. Almost half of the kids that come through our school are classified in some way as an EL, whether they're reclassified, whether they're new language learners, they have specific needs. Large population of Hispanic and giant population of low socioeconomic students. So you know all the problems that come with those, whether it's language, whether it's cultural differences, whether it's, as Ruby Kane speaks about in her framework for understanding poverty, whether it's they just have a literally different culture than we do, and our classrooms are very middle class, and they don't know how to be successful in there. They don't know the rules of how to behave, and when they're behaving in ways that are appropriate for them, it's not appropriate for our class, and it leads them to have a lot of problems. So what can we do to address as many students' needs as possible? And one of the possible solutions that we were given about 2 years ago was this idea of co-teaching. And of course that means you have 2 qualified teachers in the classroom to provide a variety of services, to provide a variety of ways of teaching for these students, and lowers the student to teacher ratio. That was the plan. Now, when they took us off for our training on these, they sat us in a room and went, here's some ways of co-teaching. Go forth and teach. It was not given a lot of thought into who was going to be teaching with whom. You were just paired, oh, you two, and you two, and you two. And as I did my research, that was the first thing they said was a mistake. That you had to have a lot of thought to the pairing that was going to be put together and not just randomly place teachers together. I was very lucky that I was placed with Danielle, because Danielle Akiro, my special ed co-teacher, and I were very simpatico right away. We didn't have some of the struggles that other teams have had, so we lucked out there. Waiting for slides. The purpose of this study was to do what we did not get a chance to do in that workshop, was to try out the different strategies with the students. So when Danielle Akira and I first were put into a team teaching situation, we just did team teach. We're both in the room. I got your back. What do you want to do? We planned together, and we kind of were like the wrestling tag team of teaching. That kid's doing something, you go get him. This one doesn't understand, I'm closer, I'll take care of it. And it wasn't really structured, but it was a relief to have another person in the room with me. And when I took this program and I started reading about all the many types of co-teaching, I thought, oh, we need to try this. How can we make this happen? And then this project came up and I was like, yes, I have a perfect reason to do this. Yes, sir.
In your class, what percentage of your students are RSP students?
We have about 10% is supposed to be. It's supposed to be about the school population. Last year, some of our classes were 30% RSP kids. I have been to, I don't even know how many IEP meetings. I'm the one filling out all those. This year, the numbers were lower because they consciously wanted to lower the numbers, because they were finding that even though it was a regular ed class with a special ed teacher in it, just by the fact of having that many special ed kids in the class really slowed down the curriculum and really made it, in essence, a special ed classroom, 30%. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Thank you. So we got together and I asked Danielle if she would be my partner in crime for my master's project, and of course she said yes. I don't think she ever says no to anybody. She's so great. And I did a lot of research and I read up on the most commonly used forms, and we chose two approaches to investigate. And then we would meet every day during our common fourth period conference, and we would decide how we were going to implement the lessons using the different ones. And we collected the data, and then we compared the two classes behaviorally and academically. So, what are the different kinds of co-teaching? There's a lot of different kinds, but these are the most common. You have, and I think this one probably gets used most, one teach, one assist. One teach, one assist is you have the classroom teacher, they give the whole lesson, and the assistant is really like an aide. And in my opinion, I don't think that's a great use of a person with that much experience and degree and education to stand there and go, you need a pencil, where's your paper? I think they can be better used. They also have parallel teaching. We'll go over all of these in just further slides. I'll give you the pros and cons on each. There's team teaching is what Danielle and I did the first year we were together. Alternative teaching and station teaching. And those are the two that we wanted to try in our classrooms. So each one has its pros and its cons. So depending on what you want to do with your students and who your students are, you can choose the method that would best suit them. So one teach and one assist, it's easy to plan because you're really only planning for the classroom teacher. Each teacher has a clear focus and defined responsibilities. I'm going to give the lesson and grade the papers. You're going to babysit and make sure they have their materials and watch the behavior. And this is where I really think co-teaching in this way does the disservice to the kids and the other teacher in the room. The big problem is this lack of parity. The kids look at the teacher who does the assisting as not a real teacher. They don't have the respect for them. They don't follow instructions. That other teacher, who is a professional, loses respect of the classroom. And I don't think that's fair. The assisting teacher is not a full partner. They don't have to do any planning. They just show up and put in. So we didn't like that one, and we've never done that one. The other one, parallel teaching. Parallel teaching is when you have two teachers in the classroom and they're giving the same lesson at the same time to two different groups of students. So in that way, for example, we would just cut the class down the middle, and Miss Akira would have half of them over there and I'd have half of them over here. We'd be giving the same lesson at the same time. So that's very equal. It does create that parity because she is clearly a teacher. I'm clearly a teacher. We're doing the same things. Small group instruction is really great. Individual attention to the smaller groups of kids helps. And because you're doing the same thing at the same time, you only want to use it in short chunks. So that's good for the kids, 5 to 7 minute attention spans. But again, the problem is you really almost have to be on a script because you have to have the same timing. If I get off on a tangent and she's done 3 minutes before I am, what are her kids doing while I'm adding to their educational experience, right? The content is kind of redundant because it's almost like an echo. There's an echo, and then of course the noise levels, because you have two different teachers speaking at the same time, and then you've got groups of students speaking at the same time. So it's gonna get very loud. If you can take that, it'd be a great way to do it. That would drive me crazy. Then we have the team teaching. This is what Danielle and I did the first time. We're both in the room. We're both masters of the content. We both input, we're kind of like the tag team. Oh, you told them that. I would like to add this to it. And both teachers are equal partners. A lot of the times the kids didn't even know who was the teacher. They just knew they had, 2 teachers. They had 2 moms. They didn't know one of us was the classroom teacher and one of us was the special ed teacher. And the teachers can really effectively communicate what they're good at. So if I'm really expert on the history of World War II when we're covering Anne Frank, that's my part. But Danielle is actually married to a gentleman who is Jewish, and she brings in the actual pieces of the Seder dinner and the Seder plate. So I've got the history, she's got the housewares, and so between the two of us, we give a really strong presentation to the kids. And when we worked on argumentation, it was great because we could take a pro side and a con side and we could discuss out the argument and let the kids see both sides before they started to write. So working in a team situation when you're working on argumentation for English is really nice. Problem: if you're not both strong, one teacher has a chance of just kind of fading in the background and becoming that one teach, one assist. If they're not comfortable with the situation, if the classroom teacher is not willing to let go of the power and share. And if there's not a good relationship with co-teachers, you just can't do this. You have to respect your co-teacher as an equal and not just, I will do it. And then we have our last two, which is alternative teaching, which I thought sounded so amazing. This sounded like such a great idea as I read it. I have some books here if you guys want to borrow. Alternative teaching is where you teach the entire class as a whole, then you assess them, and then those students who did not get it are pulled out for an alternative assignment. One teacher goes with the kids for a reteach, and the other teacher stays with the kids who mastered for an enrichment. So it allows for enrichment and reteach. It can be used as an RTI strategy. So that was a big buzzword. Our principal really liked the sound of that one. But the problem with that is if you always have the same kids failing to master, it's de facto segregation. If it's always the special ed kids that are pulled out for reteaching, it's always them. It requires a lot more planning because you have to plan 2 or 3 or 4 of the same lesson. If that kid doesn't get the first time, again. And it requires multiple lessons, multiple examples, so lots of planning, lots of paper, lots of those kids being pulled out of the class. And then finally, we had station teaching. I apologize for that. I don't know why the square is there. Station teaching was when we had our tables in groups like you see here, and each table was doing a different part of the lesson. So we would have the opening part of the lesson, everybody does that, and then 2 teachers would be discussing different things. So at one table, Miss Akira would be discussing topics. At another table, I would be discussing themes. At another group, they would be watching a video on the computers. At another one, they would be reading part of the play. And so everybody was doing something different. And in each table group, we only had 6 to 7 kids. So that goes right to the pros. It was a really small group, much smaller than the 2 teachers teaching half of the class. Now you're teaching a quarter or less, 20-25% of the class at a time. And the kids liked, we're going to do this activity for 10-15 minutes, and then we're going to move to something else. It gave them a lot of variety and let them move around. They liked the fact that some of the things were hands-on, some were videos. And it was very flexible. If somebody wasn't working out in the group they were in, it was just easy just to switch them. Oh, you're not getting it done over here. Go over here. Very easy. And again, very equal. Very high level of parity between Miss Akira and myself, because she completely taught them about topics. She was the expert on topics. I was the expert on themes. And by the time they made it through, they had covered everything. Now again, cons, the noise levels. With all those different things going on, she's talking, I'm talking, kids are talking to us, and actually getting excited in their conversations because we're so close. It's just a couple of us. It was like we were having a conversation instead of a lecture. The noise does get a little loud. And of course, some students don't work well in groups. You're just gonna have those 1 or 2 kids that it doesn't matter who they're with, either they're the class clown or they're completely the little wallflower and they don't want to say peep. And that's hard if the teacher's not with them all the time to bring them out. And when you plan things, they have to be non-sequential. So you have to be really careful when you're planning that these activities can all be standalone activities. So that took a little bit. So we, after talking about all of them, decided that we would start with, we wanted to try out station teaching and alternative teaching. So we looked at what we were going to teach, which was a unit on Anne Frank, and we decided station and alternative teaching would be the best ways for us to go. We thought alternative would be great because of small groups, both teachers are equals, and we really liked the idea that it should motivate students to want to pass, because if they passed, they were not being pulled out but given an enrichment, and that should like raise their motivation. And then the station teaching, again, we like that because it was at stations you could remediate. If you needed to, you could make a remediation station. So it's very easy. And again, enrichment activities. Oh, we've all got this. We'll make an enrichment activity station. It's very flexible. We like that, so we chose those two. So to start with, we separated our 2 classes. We did 5th period and 7th period. And we chose to do 5th period was going to be alternative, and 7th period would be station. And so to start with, we had to have the boss's favorite thing, data. So we had to have some beginning data, and so we gave them some pre-intervention data gathering tools. So I gave them a survey in which I asked them about how they felt about their abilities, how they felt about the class, how they felt about themselves as learners, and I just collected data as in positive or negative answers. We gave them a pre-test, a reading comprehension test, so I could just score like, what was their reading level before and after. And then we took a writing sample. We did an autobiographical piece of writing, one before and a very similar